And we are live.
Oh, right on. Hello, and welcome to our Business Agility video podcast. So each week we spend 30 minutes exploring business topics for growing businesses in Canada. So today we'll explore unscramble business processes and collect more revenue. So our panelists today are Samantha DeForge, Steve Swenson, myself, Marie Quibel, and we're highlighted by our guest panelist, Dennis Hale. Dennis is the VP of Sales at Aimsio. So Aimsio is a company that specializes in unscrambling processes for businesses, primarily with field operations. So Dennis has a passion for things like process optimization and really finding solutions that seem unsolvable. He can get a little bit technical too. So we're certainly excited to have Dennis share some thoughts on how we can kind of make stuff that is all over the place in many companies, how we can simplify that and then streamline it. So as always, our format is interactive. So people that have joined us on our webinar format, send us your comments in the chat box. For ones that have joined us on our Facebook live stream, send us comments and questions or anything like that. So our format, and again, we'll start with panelist introductions, and then we'll get right into our topic. So with that, I'll introduce myself quickly. I am Murray Quibel. I'm the president of Accurus Solutions, and we're a cloud enterprise resource planning or ERP software solutions provider. I'm always passionate, you've heard me speak before, I'm passionate about efficient, agile business systems. So for us, an efficient ERP system should capture business transactions real time at the source. So with that, our topic today is exactly the kinds of things that we really live and breathe every day. And having Dennis speak to how we can unscramble those processes and build efficiencies into business systems is really, really critical, and we're excited to explore. So with that, I'll pass over to, probably over to you, Dennis, for a quick introduction, and then you can pass it off on to Sam and Steve for quick intros, and then we'll get right into our topic.
Sounds great, and thanks, Murray, for the warm introduction. And much like you, I am exceptionally passionate about business processes and efficiencies, and just finding ways to achieve some kind of an outcome with the least amount of steps involved, right? So that minimal effort. Funnily enough, as you were telling me the story just before we went live about your soup hack on how to heat up soup really quickly, that really did kind of get my juices flowing, because that's the kind of thing that I love to do. Like, just do something quicker. Doesn't need to be an arduous process. So yeah, I love that kind of stuff. You know, even when it comes down to driving, I like taking the most efficient route, and it drives my wife crazy because sometimes we'll go the same way all the time, but this one time I'll choose a different path, and why are you going this way? Well, I think it may be faster. So yeah, efficiency is in my blood. I love it so much. I'm, as you said, VP Sales with Aimsio, and really excited to be a part of this team that is on this growth trajectory to really help deliver efficient business processes and optimize field operations right from source at the field level, where the revenue is being captured, all the way through to the office and beyond to their customers. So yeah, again, really excited. Thanks for having me, and I'll pass it over to Samantha.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for joining us here today, Dennis. I think we're going to have a lot to talk about, you know, as far as what we do, what you guys do, and how the one common ground, I think, for really any IT business out in the market right now is really unscrambling processes and really trying to standardize what IT can do for an organization and how processes are critical in that aspect. So my name is Samantha DeForge. I work with Accurus as the Business Solutions Manager, and we're all about, you know, creating efficiencies. So with that, I'll hand it over to Steve.
Sure. Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I'm Steve Swenson. I've been started off in accounting quite a few years ago, 25 or 28 years ago, and I've really been working. What I found was I needed to work with customers that needed to be more efficient, whether that's just improving processes, getting rid of Excel sheets, or doing a complete new process with a new ERP or anything like that. So that's really what I've enjoyed doing. My passion is making people more efficient. And I will turn it over to you guys, and we can start the discussion.
Well, I guess, you know, let's start with an introduction, I would say, to Aimsio. You know, Dennis, let's give people a little bit of an idea of what Aimsio does, you know, a quick introduction of Aimsio, so that way we have some context behind discussion, especially when it comes to field operations.
Yeah, definitely. So Aimsio is a software as a service. So we are a cloud-based software. Just for those that don't know, cloud is really a fancy word for the internet in a lot of ways. So it's a software that you can access through the internet. You can access it through a mobile device like an iPhone or an Android phone. And the purpose of the software is to connect workers specifically in heavy industry, and connect them so that there is a simple and seamless flow of information between one group within the business and another group within the business. So our software has been engineered to make sure that all of those heavy industry business processes are thoughtfully accounted for, whether it is creating a timesheet, creating field tickets, creating invoices, managing projects, purchase orders, estimations, really anything that would happen in a typical industrial play, either in the energy sector or in some construction spaces as well. And again, optimizing that process and having that flow of information. I mean, when we think about process, to me, everything is a process. And what's at the core of that process is often information, right? That information is observable and recordable by somebody, and that is required by another, right? And how that information gets passed back and forth is really what we're talking about in this process piece. So if it can be streamlined, then that's exactly, you know, our goal and our objective.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about unscrambling processes, you know, I mean, we see it all the time, right? And I think it comes back to IT requirements and software and cloud and all these different buzzwords in the market are now being, you know, not really defined as IT anymore, but really core aspects of the business. And digital transformation is no longer just an aspect of a business, but it is the business, right? I know when we met a couple of days ago, I referenced the article that I posted there on LinkedIn that Forbes posted about saying exactly that IT is not just, you know, servers or connections anymore, or VPN tunnels, or, you know, managing servers or architecture, but it's really more process driven now than anything. And CIOs nowadays will really have to understand how a business works and operates instead of just, you know, facilitating and managing a shared drive, to say the least.
Yeah, you know, whoa, what I think is kind of cool is we've talked about capturing data and business technology and IT and stuff. But what I love about the topic for today is that we're going to start off really non-technical and talking about business processes. And so, yeah, Dennis, kind of with that, I want you to talk about unscrambling business processes. What the heck does that really mean? And why is that important to kind of do that stuff first before we start talking about data?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, Murray. Technology is just the tool to help, you know, make that process truly efficient. But before you can get to that step, before you can even introduce technology into the equation, you do need to have some very clear understandings about what those processes are. So as an example, you know, we will go into an operation and, you know, let's just call it a energy services operation, for example, somewhere in Western Canada. And they have, over the course of their 20, 30 years in existence, created a lot of processes that were in the response to an immediate need, right? And they were that immediate need is often being directed by their customer, right? They may need to report in a certain way. They may need paperwork in a certain format, things like that. And it just, over the course of time, those processes start to really compound on top of each other. The company grows, they have more people involved, and soon you'll realize, if you're in that business, that, you know, we have a wealth of complexity here, and everybody is trying to ultimately make their lives a little bit easier. So they're trying to impose these process changes on others, either within their own company or externally. And the same thing is happening from the producer side of things as well. They have their own ways of collecting information. So the core piece of unscrambling a process for us and me specifically as well is really identifying what is the outcome here. What is the core outcome that you're trying to achieve? And at the end of the day, it's ultimately going to be work being performed so that in service of their customer, right? And then there is a transaction in the middle of that, and focusing on that and making sure that everything else that supports that activity is done in a very clean and linear way. Everybody's, there's even full positions within companies that are created specifically for one process, right? They will hire somebody in an administrative capacity. Maybe there's a field office that does just processing of field tickets, just processing of timesheets, and they've got a team of 2 or 3 people, right? That to me, from the outside looking in, is a very complicated process, maybe something that doesn't necessarily need to be that complex, but it was created to support that transaction. So again, I think it's really about drawing a very straight line between what needs to be done, what information needs to be grabbed, and then only at that moment can you introduce technology to try and bring some efficiency to that process.
Can you, one of the things you mentioned is linear processes. And I think it's when we think about business processes, you might think, well, maybe you get a field ticket signed in the field and then that goes to the head office to invoice. But maybe talk a little bit about processes, because they're not always linear, are they? Sometimes something else needs to happen, but that kind of thing is where the unscrambling might need to happen. But maybe just drill into that a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and great question, Murray. And you're right. It's definitely not linear when you're in it. And I think what you need to start with is that linear is a hierarchy of your processes, right? Start point, end point. What's the goal? What's the objective?
Yeah.
But absolutely, these things do need to be happening simultaneously, because there's never going to be a perfect baton handoff process to process. Things are always going to be happening in conjunction with others. So again, what you can do as a business is look linearly at everything that you need to do. Like from an administrative capacity, what needs to be done end to end. Financial capacity, what needs to be done end to end, from purchase orders to procurement through to invoicing. What does that look like? Where are those steps? And start to really almost draw it out. Have a bit of a map to these processes. Same thing on the project management front. Projects begin, projects end. What needs to happen in there? And we like to use a lot of Gantt charts in our software, as well as just internally, which just has a bit of a layering effect of processes, where you can understand how these things all relate. That something similar to that is always a really good thing to implement when you're trying to deconstruct your own processes and find where the overlap can actually be converted to an efficiency play, right? If project controls, as well as finance, as well as admin, as well as field operations, all need to do one thing where they have a commonality. If you have a technology in the middle of that to connect that information so that they can see it all at the same time, then you've just made a significant stride towards efficiency.
See, and I think that's something a lot of businesses, particularly in the energy sector, or maybe construction as well, is I think their processes and their idea of processes is that they still need those handful of people doing that manual entry, right? So, I think a really good idea of looking at it is data should be captured once. And data should be captured once and then flown through the process using technology tools. But I think in a lot of cases, there's a lot of people that think that they still need people to enter that data. And they think that that's still an aspect of the process when it's not. So how do we tell companies and organizations, whether you're energy service, whether you're manufacturers, that is not part of the process? Would saying that data should be captured once eliminate that, or where are thoughts around that?
I honestly think that it's a mindset change, right? It's a shift in mindset where people that are maybe doing this kind of administrative work, where I would call rote work or very repetitive work, their mindset needs to shift into from administration to more auditing, right? So you're right, exactly, Samantha. If that information is captured at source, and let's again think about a energy services or some kind of construction play where that information at source is the field, right? If the field is empowered with a tool that can help them capture that information, it doesn't need to be 100% accurate, right? It really doesn't. And I think that's part of the fear, is that, well, we can't, have full trust that whatever, Joe's supervisor enters into this digital field ticket is accurate. That's fine. It doesn't even need to be accurate. But the fact that the work, that data entry piece, has been quickly assigned to that source, and then everybody downstream from that action is now an auditor in a sense, right? They can go through, they can approve, they can review. That work is much less tedious than that rote kind of repetitive administrative stuff that happens.
Well, you almost face more risk having to re-enter that data several times through different areas, you know, and adding a 0 or adding a 1, whatever it might be. You
100%.
have a higher risk of, you know, incorrect data by not capturing it at the source. And I guess, yeah, it's, you know, to clarify, when you do capture data at the source, you still have the ability to modify it. It's not, you know, a commandment and it's set in stone and this is what it's going to be for, you know, yes, you do have the ability to modify it, but you know, why would you have to type all of this information over and over again in 4 or 5 different places, right?
Yeah, it's the #1 challenge that we deal with on a daily basis, is having is trying to eliminate redundant data entry, right? People are tired of it. They're sick of it. It's way too comprehensive, too complex. That's why Aimsio is really positioned as this kind of operational front end that would support, like it captures the data at source and moves it through the chain, and then it supports an ERP, right? The ERP, we're not looking to replace that. That still has an incredibly significant, tremendous function for any business. But having that operational front end in there to, as you say, capture the information at source, move it through approvals, move it through auditing, it does eliminate a lot of that redundancy.
I have, you know, and we could literally talk for about 2 hours or more on the topic today. Of course, we only have less than 15 minutes, and there are a couple areas I want to make sure that we get to today. So one of the key things is collect more revenue. So that's the unscramble processes and collect more revenue. So I want, you know, we want to get to that. We want to talk about some KPIs and statistics and things like that. And I want, make sure that we have time for that. We'll probably go there next. And then the other thing we want to do is get into some tips and tricks, and what can people or what can companies do next. So those are some key areas I want to get to. But maybe we'll switch gears in there. Maybe Dennis, maybe can you throw us some examples and maybe some key performance indicators or statistics that can really improve the value of getting a handle on some of this stuff a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely, Murray. So of course, all of these processes, like we've just been talking about, are designed to move information back and forth. But at the end of the day, that information supports revenue, right? So without shovels going into the ground or work being done in the field, the revenue is not coming in. There's no billable revenue of any kind. So we need to make sure that that process is clean to support the revenue. Now, what many of our customers experience when it comes to, first of all, unscrambling and those processes, making them more efficient, is that they can really reduce days to invoice, right? So DTI, days to invoice, significantly less in a optimized solution like a software play. For example, we have one customer that went from 52 days to invoice between the work being completed and that invoice being generated and sent to their customer, to down to 7 days. So for anybody that's in the financial space, that moving work in progress to an invoice as fast as humanly possible is equal to cash flow, right? It is as good as cash in many cases. So that is one of the largest KPIs that our customers want to get a handle on. They want to track it, and we've seen dramatic reductions. We even had one that was 90 days plus, just due to the overwhelming complexity of their processes, down to 10 or less. Having real-time insights into that trend is a total game changer. We have another customer that they said to us, at any given moment, pre-Aimsio compared to post-Aimsio, they have an extra $1.5 to $2 million of cash in the bank. Again, it equals cash flow, right? So it's all connected to revenue. Another part of that whole process, though, of unscrambling those processes is again, just capturing other information. We have one customer that this year alone, or last year in 2020, they generated and created and captured 50,000 documents in Aimsio, right? Between different forms, tickets, timesheets, things like that, 50,000. and every one of those 50,000 documents were done manually before. So you can imagine just how much time is being saved there when you're digitizing 50,000 documents in a single year compared to what you were doing with them manually before. So massive improvements across the board there. And another one I'll just highlight too is, by having this information at source grabbed, put into a database, and have a layer of analytics put over top of it, they're actually able to monitor things like labor as a percentage of their revenue, right? So now that kind of metric, again, being fed to them in real time, allow them to see that normally they're hovering around about a 70% labor to revenue percentage, right? 70% of their revenue comes from labor. But they noticed that over the past few months, there were some trends towards 90%. Why? They were stable at 70. Why are they going to 90? They were able to dig into that data, understand that, oh, looks like we're putting more overtime hours on these projects. We don't need to do that. Looks like there's too many people on this job that we don't need to have them there. So let's reduce that. Let's make ourselves more profitable. Like it all came together in a nice dashboard that they use on a daily basis, again, to make those data-driven decisions. So that's just a couple examples, Murray. We've got plenty, but I think that should give everyone a good kind of flavor anyways for the things that we focus on here.
I definitely think that the visibility aspect is probably incredibly critical for especially the oil and gas industry nowadays, knowing exactly where you stand at every given second, right? That is probably very, very important to any sort of oil and gas company nowadays. And, being able to digitize and automate certain processes and then getting a better handle, not only on cash flow, but really streamlining those operations and saving money for that industry who is in dire need of that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the cash flow piece, I mean, in many cases is the difference between solvency and insolvency, right? Like if we're at that stage of the game where you're trying, your business is already on life support, which we know a lot are right now, having that visibility and having that cash flow, again, a total game changer, and can give you not only stability, but also a bit of a competitive advantage as well.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. I think absolutely. And I think, with 7 minutes to spare, I mean, Murray mentioned tips and tricks, and I think that that's really important. We really got to get into that. How does a business know, whether it's a manufacturer for any sort of company out there, whether you're oil and gas, whether you're construction, let's just be general at this point. How does a business know, from a process standpoint, that they have a process inefficiency? What would your tips and tricks be, Dennis? I mean, in your particular example.
Oh, can I answer that one first?
Sure. Mine's going to be Excel. So.
Darn, that was going to be mine too. I'll let you go. But yeah, great question, Sam. I think the spreadsheets, if that's how data is being captured, that's the easy answer. And I wanted to get in there and buzz in my answer in quick. But Dennis, why don't you speak to, I'll let Sam finish her question and have you speak to that.
No, I mean, we all know, we've been saying Excel is not free. I think any software company, you can buy a $250,000 piece of software if you're a $50 million company, and it's still going to save you money. That doesn't mean that software costs that much, but it just to put it into perspective, right? I mean, I've worked with a lot of companies, both in energy services or manufacturers, where there is substantial room for inefficiencies, right? We worked with a company that in the past had a $75,000 mistake. So we were exploring an option for a solution, and they're like, yeah, you know what, maybe we'll put it on hold for a bit. They ended up calling us back 3 months later because they're like, yeah, we missed an invoice because it was tracked in Excel and it cost us $75,000. So we think we need something. And then sure enough, we work with them actively now. But I guess, yeah, Dennis, what are your tips and tricks for a company? How do you get someone to know that they have a problem?
Yeah, and thanks for, first of all, establishing the fact that Excel is not free. It certainly is not. It can cost a lot of money just in errors alone. So I think one thing that we try and focus on is, and we talk about efficiency quite a bit, and we've been throwing that word around a lot. One thing that we really lean on for a metric for efficiency is billable to non-billable staff ratio. So if a company has, 1,000 people in the field and they have 100 people in the office, right, to support those 1,000 workers, right, you're looking at like a 10-to-1 ratio. That number is really a good indicator, because let's be honest, it's your billable people out in the field that are generating the revenue. The people in the office, very important, not to downplay people's roles that are in the office, in the back office. It's incredibly important. But if your business, if you think that you can scale your business on the field side, on the billable side, without having to add more bodies, then you're probably at a pretty good position. But if you realize, hey, we're going to add 10 more people out there, and we really got to have 2 more admins to support that flow of information, well, then there's a problem, right? So it's an indicator that we really like to work with. As a good benchmark, there's a very well-established company in Calgary that we would call very efficient. They're at a 12-to-1 ratio right now, and they're still looking to make that better, right? That 12-to-1, we want to make it 20-to-1. We want to make it 25-to-1. It's a real number. So that's one thing that we lean on a lot. And I would honestly say, if you're feeling like you're maybe a little inefficient, look at that ratio. And if it's really low, you're looking at a 5 or less, man, it's time to think about changing something.
That's a really good way to look at it. I guess that would be relevant for you guys with, working with a lot of field workers and things like that. I never would have thought that would have been the way to do that. That's interesting to think it that way. Yeah.
So if we think about, so we got a couple minutes left, we think about tips and tricks. And I think one of the things that's easy for companies to do to go, you know what, love it, it makes sense, I got compelling value in doing it, but oh man, the producer is saying I have to spit out reports in this fashion, or I don't really know where to start, it's too daunting. But what are your, maybe just to throw a couple of tips and tricks as to how can we actually start? What's some kind of ways that work best to kind of avoid that seeming too daunting?
Yeah, great question, Murray. I think first of all, try and be flexible, right? Try and be flexible internally so that you have the ability to provide information in various ways to your customers. But at the same time, I think a little bit of pushback is not a bad thing, right? I've found that even in major producers, project to project, the demands in terms of documentation varies dramatically, right? Yeah. Even within the same organization. So try and have a little bit of pushback. I know we all like making our customers happy and making sure that they're getting everything that they need. But I think there's a real problem out there with the lack of standardization in our business in terms of, what information needs to go back and forth. So be flexible, but also be firm. Try and, again, doing what you can, even in the absence of software, capturing information at source, right? Even if it's a matter of just snapshotting, taking a picture of a ticket and just sending it to the office so they can throw it in a folder. Like, just start with that so that at least you have some centralization, because ultimately at the end of the day, a lot of these processes are very time consuming, and that time consumption is due to the fact that everything is scattered all over the place. So just with your existing infrastructure, as best you can, with your folders on your computer, with your email inbox, whatever you have, try and organize it by job, create some kind of a hierarchy. Honestly, Aimsio, we have this a hierarchy laid out. It's a very well-engineered database, and the hierarchy is really, really important. So try and start there. That's the best place to begin if you don't have that software in place.
All right, well, we got a minute left. Some final thoughts?
Ooh, I got a final thought. Yeah, make sure you capture the data once. Capture the data once. If you're putting it from Excel sheet to Excel sheet, you have a problem.
Yeah. Steve?
A big problem.
I just like the Excel is not free. And people,
I like
people
that.
don't get that.
For me, we'll give Dennis the final thought. For me, the one thing was, when you think about where we might start, is you start with one project or one crew or one type of work, and so instead of it being so daunting across the organization, just start somewhere. I love what Dennis mentioned about maybe taking snap pictures of things, but just start somewhere. Dennis, final thought.
Yeah, you took mine, Murray. I'm not going to lie, but no, it's. For me, again, just focus on the end goal, right? And look at where you have, look at the journey of that information, and just try and take a step back. It really is easy to be embedded in this stuff, and there's a wealth of value that can come from just stepping back, looking at it from end to end, and then starting to solve on a micro level first before you get to that, that macro level.
Cool. Great.
All right, well, we are at the 2:30 mark, so thank you everyone for joining us. If you do want any more information on Aimsio, they do have a fabulous product when it comes to a field solution. It is very, very chic, as I would call it. It is web-based, it is SaaS, great product for field operations, and integrates well with a lot of different ERP solutions on the market. So hopefully we'll see you guys next week for our next session at Thursday at 2 p.m. But thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.